Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Narcotics News. We are thrilled to welcome special guests OBN former Director Dodd and OBN Chief Reyes to discuss their experiences at OBN and as women in law enforcement. We hope you enjoy the show. Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining us for our new episode of Narcotics News. Today we have two very special guests. We have former Director Elaine Dodd and Chief Reyes here to discuss their time at OBN and their experience as women in law enforcement. I think that Elaine was here from 76 to 97, about?
95.
95, perfect. And Chief Reyes started in 99. She celebrated her 25th anniversary this year, so we're very proud to have her here. And I'm also very honored to be a part of this podcast episode and to be able to talk about this interesting topic with such amazing women. All right. Do you have anything you'd like to add, or do you want to get started with the questions?
Let's just jump into it. Let's do it.
Okay. So, first of all, I'm very interested in what inspired you all to go into law enforcement when you were starting out your careers. What was that inspiration for you?
Rosa, do you want to go first, or do you want? No, I'll let you go first. You're more interesting than I am. Not really. I have more stories than owls, I can say that. What inspired me to go into law enforcement? It was just, I am a firm believer that the world hands you what you need if you have your eyes open. And when I was in school at OU, I was flat broke and eating macaroni, and I needed a job, obviously. And a friend who was a narcotics agent at the time at OSBI taught me into working dispatch at OSBI. So I actually worked nights dispatching from 4 to midnight every other week and midnight to 8 in the morning the next week, which was just a trial during college. But got to know all the narcotics agents, and there were only 8 of them, 6 to 8, depending on the time. But because I loved what I saw them doing, Galen Hayes, who was the friend who asked me to work there, called me when I was preparing to graduate and said, we want you to come here as an intelligence analyst. So that's what I did the first year at the Bureau of Narcotics.
That's so cool. And what about you, Rosa?
A little bit different. While I was at OU, I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. And my calling was helping people. And so I jumped a little bit around on as far as what I wanted to, my degree to be in. And I settled with sociology. I took a lot of psychology and sociology courses, and I really enjoyed just learning about what affects people in general. And so my first 2.5 years, I went into social work. And during that time, I worked a lot with juvenile delinquents. And so one thing that I found through my responsibilities as a juvenile delinquent worker was that my job was to do everything I could to help them, give them the tools to be successful. But the problem that we faced was you can do everything you can do a whole lot for them, but if their foundation, and in this case would be the parents, were not stable, then it didn't matter. It didn't matter the efforts that you put in place, the resources that you found for them to be successful. They still went back to that same unstable situation, dysfunctional situation. And whether it was a parent or two or both parents that were drug addicts, it wasn't going to matter. They were going to fail. So going into my third year, or coming up to my third year, I was really frustrated. I felt like I'm a person that likes to, if there's a problem, we're going to figure out how to fix it. Clearly, this was a huge problem that I was not going to be able to resolve on my own. And I got really frustrated. During that process of my career in social work, I met an agent with the Oklahoma Bureau of Narcotics, and we talked in depth about the type of work that he did. And one of that was working in dismantling drug trafficking organizations, not drug addicts, but dismantling drug trafficking organizations. And the fact that I spoke Spanish, that really was a big factor for that agent to recruit me. I know that back then in '99, when I first came into law enforcement, uh, there was issue with illegal marijuana coming from Mexico. However, the thing that was also a huge problem that was causing overdoses was methamphetamine. And so there was a lot of methamphetamine coming in from Mexico. And I know at the time, OBN was starting to do, they had done a couple of wiretaps already, and they were starting to do more and more. Well, these targets that they were doing wiretaps on were people from Mexico. And so the fact that I spoke Spanish was really the way that I got recruited and coming to work for OBN. And to my surprise, the fact that I felt like I was not useless, but I wasn't doing a whole lot in social work. And I give those people that are in social work a lot of kudos. I don't feel like they get appreciated enough. And it's unfortunate because they do a lot more than we give them credit for. And I don't think they have the funds or resources to help them do a better job. But in my case, I felt like I was being better used being in law enforcement, and I was going to be able to at least come up with, I was hoping to be part of the solution to the problems that we have with illegal drugs.
Yeah, that's really cool. It's interesting that both your stories sort of began at OBN because you met someone who worked here and that you saw through their eyes what their job was like, and then you guys both joined here, which is really cool that you had a similar experience, even though, of course, at different times. And but I'm glad that you find it fulfilling to work at OBN, and that's an amazing story. So I guess this is more directed at Elaine, but since you did join OBN right after it was created as a new agency, what was it like for women when they were starting out at OBN?
Well, first, they did not mean for me to be an agent. There were very few women in law enforcement at that point in time. Houston was recruiting heavily women. I wasn't heavy enough for Houston. You had to fit the male structure. Probably wouldn't have been a choice. Ironically, I have to add, Rosa, that was my path a lot at OU because I was a math major, didn't know what I wanted to do with it, and I switched over into criminal justice law enforcement and found my niche. So very much the same. But when I became an agent, I was back running out. We had a newsletter called Odin, and it went out to folks with all the arrests and that type of information. And I decided I wanted to be an agent because I was putting together the cases structurally. I do the flow charts and all that. But I didn't get to go on the arrests or do see the product of it. So I decided to be an agent and told them that, and they went, no. Specifically, Bill Keister, who I can name because I have a lovely story with him afterward. He was the head of the just the criminal division at that time. We had about 12 people. We were all piled into one long room. It was really vastly different back then. When he interviewed me, he said, "We're going to let you try here, but you won't be here 6 months." I said, okay, I would love to try, and I'm up for the challenge. And sure enough, we learned to really appreciate each other through the years so much that he came back when I was director to get me to sign the commission card, the retired commission card for him because he wanted one signed by a woman. He came around and delighted by that. It was very different being a woman in good ways and bad ways. A lot of people were very dismissive. It was very different going through police school because I was the only female. There were very few women. OCPD had hired their first 5 women to be on the streets at that point in time, and they're all just wonderful folks. But it was a very different time, and so the good thing was that it was easier to work undercover. because no one thought that there would be a female undercover agent. And you could do things like one particular case that comes to mind. I was at on one of the university campuses, and a guy who was a lab guy came up to me and asked me for my number, and I gave it to him, but he never called me. Like, what good was that, dude? I thought it was an end. But those types of things did make it easier because people did not imagine that you were law enforcement. So that was nice on the undercover end of it.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I was actually reading a little bit about women in law enforcement historically, and I think that they said that one of the main reasons women undercover were so useful was like in vice groups, for example, because like they could serve undercover. People wouldn't think that they were obviously undercover, but that was a particular opening for women, which is really interesting. But because I think that you started, if it's 76, that would have been like 4 years after Title VII. So that was like really soon after that legislation that helped women to be in law enforcement.
On the vice end, I went, one of my very first cases, I was kind of just thrown in with this lady that I was working for one of the other agents, and we went into a pool parlor in Oklahoma City, and I said, now you didn't tell people I'm working the streets, did you? Because I literally, when I started there, I looked 12, 14. I mean, I looked very young at the young end of it. And she said, oh no, honey, I told him you're a trucker. Well, good. I thought nothing about trucks. Thanks very much for that.
That's pretty good. Hopefully they don't ask you any questions.
Yeah.
Oh, that is really cool. And my first, so you retired in 95. So that means that you were here for almost 20 years. And I'm sure that so much changed during that time, but how did the OBN environment change for women in that 20 years?
It was very different for women. Well, obviously, I became director. So
right.
That was even when I became chief agent, thank you, Rosa, for being in that role. It was everything was a first. So when I became chief agent, it was kind of they were surprised to make that work. But by working all the divisions, I had the ability and the fortune to work in everything as I went along. So I was primed for that, and I thought for the director role also. So it really worked out.
So you were the chief of diversion before you became director?
Yes.
Awesome. Yeah. And that was such an important time because I know that there were a lot of advancements made in diversion specifically. So what was it like to help forge those tools?
It was amazing. That's one of my favorite things to have ever done. We tried to get triplicate prescriptions, which is just simply the doctor pressing down a little harder on a pad, and it would go in places to be input in computers. California, Texas ahead of us, and they were so backlogged that things didn't get in the computers early. And we were beating our head against the wall. The big drug companies were coming to the Capitol and fighting us with all their money, and it just wasn't going anywhere. And we decided to do an end around. And one of the guys at the Board of Pharmacy said, how about if we try this by computers? And I, in my infinite wisdom, said, pharmacies don't have enough computers to make this happen. That's how old I am, that they didn't. But it turned out 95% of them were computerized enough to do it. So I wrote the legislation for OSTAR, which was our Schedule II tracking, and was the first in the nation to do it by computer. And we just directly tracked the drugs at the pharmacy. And it was a precursor to a lot of the things that they do wonderfully there at the Bureau. They, of course, are much better now, but really glad to have done that little inroad to be able to track, because it literally saved lives. I had a doctor tell me that when we actually arrested him, it saved his life. So there's good news stories behind the tracking systems.
Yeah. I'm such a fangirl because I'm actually the PNP training specialist here, so I know all about OSTAR.
Oh, yes.
When I saw that, I was like, oh, I have to ask her.
that makes you a nerd, just like me, just like
I am a nerd.
but it's okay. I owned it. But it was pretty cool to write the legislation because there wasn't any anywhere else. And the pharmacy, the legislators were poised to tank it. And then when they listened behind the scenes to this is really what's happening, they were all foursquare. Yes, we can do this. So yes, it didn't have the problems that triple the prescription carried, the bad stories about it. So
right, that is so cool. And I suppose, like, were there any of like your most interesting cases in diversion that you could talk about, or like were there any favorite cases of yours through your time at OBN?
My probably favorite in diversion, we had a doctor that was giving Dilaudid to ladies ladies of the street. I'm trying to think of a nice way to say it, that he was taking to Hawaii with him. We knew what was going on, but when we brought him in to OBN to talk about his overprescribing vastly on the Dilaudid, which is synthetic heroin. I mean, it's a very strong opioid. He said that he was using it on his plants because it would make their central nervous systems laid back and he could grow really large tomatoes. So he took a picture right on top of a tomato to prove his point. The first, plants don't have central nervous systems, and this isn't where you're using your drugs. But his little wife who was there bought into the whole story. So I guess that's where it came from. There are so many doctor cases that pharmacy cases. But we had one where there were 5,900 pints of Citra Forte, which was a scheduled cough syrup. You don't just lose 5,900 pints. So the numbers back when were huge, and there are people lined up at doctors' offices, just doctor shoppers. Just you could expect to see it. So every case was fun in that arena.
And actually, I've heard from our public information officer, Mark, that you actually are doing a Netflix special for one of your cases.
I'm not doing it. I am a tiny little cog in that wheel. But John Madinger, who was an agent there for years and relocated to Hawaii, bless his heart. But he wrote a book about George Eric Marquardt, which is truly maybe the most fascinating case that I ever got to help with there. He was a chemist. He is now deceased, but he initially was making hallucinogenic amphetamine, 2,4,5-TMA, and the feds did not know what it was. He ran his own mass specs through Tulsa University to show us at the arrest. He's like, here's my mass specs from this drug, and this is what it is. He said he knew he got it right when he was going to his girlfriend's at Norman at OU, and his windows melted in his truck, so he knew he was right. And I'm like, that is amazing. He was very much like Breaking Bad.
I was gonna say pre-Breaking Bad.
Exactly. You wanted him to be good and do good, and yet time after time he kept coming back, and he looked at it like a cops and robbers type thing. He loved the chase and the being a part of it, but then he made fentanyl, and accidentally on his part, but still shame on him for all the labs. But he killed a lot of folks, and New York Times did a story on him and included OBN as the arrest that we made on him. My part in it was getting to go up on his porch with one of the other agents. Icy weather, you couldn't even drive on the roads. We stopped near his house in the country where he's making the drugs, and I got to go up on his porch, and he said, "Oh, I'd love to invite you in." And I said, "I need your phone. We're having car trouble. Got to use your phone." That's before cell phones. And he said, "Oh, I wish I could let you in." He was giddy about it, but he did not let us in. He just visited a minute on the porch, and we, of course, could smell noxiously the methamphetamine at the time. And that funny thing is, when we arrested him, the morning, 2 mornings after that, he looked at me and said, "When you were on my porch, I knew it's either a gift from God or the cops. I guess I should have gone with the latter." That was funny. Quite a sense of humor on an arrest.
Yeah. Well, I guess if you loved the chase, I guess I'm not surprised you found a little bit of humor in it.
Here, that later when he talked to Mattinger years and years later, so that was kind of interesting. So drugs off the street. That was the beauty of it.
Yeah, I'll be really interested to watch whenever it's a documentary, correct? That's coming out?
Yeah. It'll be on Netflix in probably September-ish.
Wow, that's awesome. I'll have to keep an eye out for that one. So did they like reach out to interview you? Like did Netflix like reach out to you, or how did that happen?
The producer sent me an email saying, "Would you like to be a part of this?" And I'm like, "Oh yes, I would." It was fascinating. Just it was fun. I hope I don't look like an idiot. It's possible.
I bet it's amazing. But
you're gonna make OBM proud, I'm sure.
Okay. Marissa, are there any cases that stand out in your time as an agent as well?
You know, I haven't had we move so fast here, and Elaine, you tell me if I'm wrong, but I feel like OBM, because of how we do things, our approach, I believe since I've been here for 25 years, we've always had the proactive approach. And so because we move so fast, not only are we very proactive, we have a proactive approach, we also have a very innovative solving method approach. Because of that, I don't think that we really have the time to really look back at our careers and really appreciate what we've done. And I look forward to retiring because I would love to go back and just sit there and process everything that I was a part of, not only with my cases, but with the people here and the cases that they work, because I know we've done so many amazing things at OBN. So again, I know that I do have a lot of good stories. I just haven't had the time to really sit back and appreciate that. Elaine, is that kind of a fair statement when you were here?
Absolutely. Some of them you had to. I know you had to have known Lonnie.
Yes, he's the one that hired me. Okay,
I assume that.
And I'll tell you, Hannah, I have to say this, and I'm sorry to interrupt, Elaine, but you know, I'm glad you brought Lonnie in this conversation. Lonnie did a direct hire with me, and this man was big. I mean, he was 6'5", maybe 275 plus pounds, but he wasn't just physically big. His brain, his mind was also big. He always thought big. He was one of the reasons why I continue to have a career at OBM, because when you think, a lot of people think state is great, federal is even better. But in my experience, there's too many red tape that keeps you from going the pace that you're going, and you're having to constantly hit the brakes. Well, at OBN, we're very fortunate. We had a lot of pioneers, and they just let us work. They let us work and keep going, keep that foot on the gas pedal all the time. And I feel because of that, we were and we are able to do all these amazing things. Lonnie Wright, again, was a big man with a big vision, and he allowed his group. He was my chief at the time when I was hired. He allowed us to work these big cases and to think big. And he was my first mentor here, along with Scott Rowland, who's now a judge. Mm-hmm. But they both, and I don't think they really consciously made any efforts to generate leaders. They just did it. You know, the way they come across their ideas and all that, they included you in the solving process. And just through that kind of practice, they built leaders. And Lonnie Wright in my opinion, one of the best things that happened to Obian, even though he had his life was cut short because of a massive heart attack that he suffered back in 2005. He left Obian as our chief, came back as our director, and only was our director for a year. But in that year, as a director, he did an amazing stuff. So I'll go ahead and pass that to Elaine. I'll let you finish what you were going to say. I just feel like I had to say that.
One of the reasons I asked you, Lonnie, is because I knew he talked to me about you when he hired you, and he was so proud.
Lonnie played football at OU at the time the Selmas played, so he was tremendously huge. And walking with him one time in Las Vegas, people thought I had a bodyguard. I know you'd appreciate that. But they're like, who is that person? But Lonnie went through police school the same time I did. And so, we always had a trajectory that kind of mimicked each other through all the years. He and I would not have been around had we a particular instance that happened. You're asking about other cases in Southeast Oklahoma. We went down it was just a marijuana deal that was huge. Lonnie and I were to go out there first or by ourselves. We went into town and everybody went with us. It was a train of people. So, that's the way law enforcement, it's just the way it worked, right? I had an informant in the car with me a few years after that. And he said, I've seen you. And I said, no, I would recognize you. And he said, no, I have seen you. You used to drive a blue Grand Prix. And I said, yes, I did. And he said, he named the property that we were on. Couldn't tell you the name now, but he said, you and that big old boy were supposed to come out there to check it out. I was in the tree with a sniper rifle. And my job was to end it right there, but you brought a whole damn train with you. And he said, yes. So he just told me that like I had eggs for breakfast. I mean, it didn't bother him that his job had been to do that nefarious deed. But I guess Lonnie and I both literally dodged a bullet back then. So that there are cases like that you can't forget the things attached to it because you just go, it just takes your breath away. But luckily we had the whole world with us. So, but Lonnie, absolutely one of my all-time ever favorites, no question. And Scott Rowland, fabulous. And all the early people, I should say, the Tom Sosbys, the Leon Gillums, the Charlie Ryans. There were just a ton of people way back when that started the place and kept it running.
I could say that based on that foundation, OBN, we've done a really good job of hiring people that have the same mindset, the same ideas. But again, it goes back to that foundation that was built back in the 70s.
That's really cool. It's so awesome to hear about the people who helped forge the agency that we know today, because I'm relatively new, so I'm still learning a lot about OBN's history here. I've heard of Lonnie, for example, but I haven't actually heard much about him, so it's nice to hear about him from you all as well. As far as our episode today, I suppose one question that I would have for young women out there who are thinking about joining law enforcement or are recently joined, like myself, what advice would you give to them as such inspiring women?
I think one of the things is to think about where you want to be in law enforcement before you hone your skills for it. As Rosa did in her social work, that's a brilliant place to be because you see and learn so much in that. One of the things that I have found to be just a wonderful, lucky thing in my world, I happened into the fraud division at the OBA. In fact, I got to create the fraud division at the Bankers Association and learned through that. I just retired with 20 from them. And I learned through that time that there are wonderful law enforcement oriented jobs in banks, which who would have thought of that? So if you want to be looking at fraud, think about that as somewhere you may want to connect. If you're wanting to take drugs off the street, then obviously you just need to hone your skills in the direction that you think you want to be. So don't just narrowly focus on I want to be FBI, Secret Service, and have wonderful friends there. I love those feds too. But look at the state agencies because they're wonderful. Look at what you want to be, and then hone your skills and be prepared. Even now, as a female, it's still different. I mean, I just can't say that it's not. And we're trying. I have a granddaughter now, and I had hoped when I was starting college in '72 that we'd have all this ironed out and everything would be easy and it's just not. So you have to be prepared to stand toe to toe, use your deep voice, and get your words in. And that's another thing I would say. Don't be afraid to speak up, because if you think something is a good fit or something, if you don't say it at the table or get your voice heard, someone at the other end of the table is going to put in that same idea, and you're sitting there thinking, well, that's exactly where I wanted to go with it. Don't be afraid to interject. Don't be afraid of having your place at the table, having your space in the world. That's a big thing to me.
And I'll add to that, 25 years later, we've only had 3 female chiefs. 25 years. Elaine, Cindy Cunningham, and myself. But I agree with her. You're gonna get dismissed, okay, many a times. Don't let that be your identity. Don't let that bring you down. It is still a very predominant male profession. Don't be fooled. Don't be naive. It is what it is. But if you understand why you're going into it in the first place, what your goals are, and stick to those goals, you're going to be successful. I hope that people come into this profession knowing that we're here for the purpose of public safety. Don't get so fixated on trying to prove that you're better than anybody else, that females can do it. Stick to your goals and your script, and I guarantee that your actions will be heard. They will be heard. Don't sit back. Speak your mind, especially when something is wrong or it could be better. Even if you're dismissed, keep saying it, because somebody in that room will be smart enough to hear you. And OBN has plenty of smart people. Law enforcement has a lot of smart people. There are some people that don't listen, but those are the dumb ones. But I guarantee you, we have a lot of smart men and women in this profession, and you will be heard.
And Cindy Cunningham, I have to say, I should have, Malcolm Atwood also from way back when, I should give kudos to. And Cindy with her drug dog certification, people came here. It's like on the OSTAR, on the Sudafed, on all these things. People have looked to OBN to be the how do we do this? So it's such a wonderful success story.
That was really cool. I read about Cindy Cunningham a little bit from Mark had like a little synopsis that she'd written when she was here. Oh. And she talked about one of her dogs. I think it was named Duke, maybe? Duke. It was one of, yeah. It was her, I think it's something he was like one of the first like TSA trained dogs that wasn't TSA. I think was the fact that was with that one. But that was a really cool thing that she said that she traveled like to train this dog and how much she loved to do rescue dogs too, which is interesting because I think that people forget that some dogs and like historically came from the rescues and that people tried to find the ones that had the spirit to be canines and to help them find a home, which is really cool. So her story is also really inspiring.
Yeah.
But I mean, yeah, it is so great to hear that advice, of course, because I think that some women can be afraid sometimes to approach job areas that are traditionally seen as being more like a male-dominated area. But I think that there definitely are places for women to be and to occupy. And I'm glad that that is changing, even though there are still limits that are in place against women in some areas, like we are making advances. So that is really inspiring.
If I can add something to that, if you see something that needs to be done, it's kind of like Disney. It's everybody's job to do everything right. I felt that way at OBN, and when the computer tanked in our doctor system, where for the drug certifications, it we lost all the data at one point in time, and it was all hands on deck. And no matter what position you're in, you dive in and do it. And by doing so, I think women are particularly great at that skill, a diversity of things. And then people have to come to you and say, well, how can we fix this? How do we do this? And I think that's a great skill that women have. A lot of men do too, but women certainly do.
Yeah, and that is really cool because I mean, I think that it's one of the reasons why women, it's so important for us to be in law enforcement is because we have different skill sets, of course, and it is interesting to read about people in history. I like love history, so I read a lot of bios, but and there are so many great people who have been in law enforcement. It is interesting because a lot of the female law enforcement agents are like people who have their bios written up. They typically have more emphasis on their community engagements as well as their engagements just in their position. And of course, I think that the male agents also are community oriented. It's not just that they just aren't really, it's not specified in a lot of their achievements. And so it is interesting that there is a very heavy emphasis on community building. And that is one of the reasons women are so important.
And I'll tell you this, and Elaine, you've been in law enforcement for 40 years now. So if I am wrong in saying this, by all means, correct me. But I think, in law enforcement, because it's been a male dominant career or profession, there's a brotherhood. Women still haven't figured out how to have a sisterhood in this career and this profession. And we say we're getting better, we are, but the progress that we've made has been extremely slow, in my opinion. And I would love for it to pick up some speed. But it's important for women to understand that we have a job to do as well. We owe it to ourselves to kind of forge that kind of relationship, a sisterhood. And not only that, within the sisterhood, we should empower each other, because many times what I see is that we are our worst enemy. And for whatever reason, like, we already get it from the male side. To get it from the female side is unfortunate. And we have to understand that in order for this to work, we have to build each other. We have to empower each other. We have to trust each other. And we're slowly getting there. I'm not saying that we haven't made strides. We are getting there. But that is something that I think that we need to continue with a full force, is getting to the point where we built this sisterhood, this confidence, this trust. And again, to praise each other when we've done something good. I feel like women are expected to have these standards that are a lot higher, which is unfortunate. But that's what I guess what makes us greater. I mean, I'm not saying that to be what's the word? Cocky. I'm not. We've always have felt like we needed to be better for them to take us serious. And it's unfortunate, but at the same time, I believe that's made us even better. And so we have to do a better job of giving other females kudos for the job that they're doing, recognize what they're doing and appreciate that and not take it for granted. And so I think it really does start with ourselves.
No question. Truer words were never spoken. That was absolutely gold right there.
Yeah, I think that is so true, that it's really up to us to have to feel value in ourselves and to also boost up those around us. And I am really glad that I think there have been, I wish it was also a faster process to, of course, achieving sisterhood, but I do know that there are some things that we're working towards. Like I know that OBN went to the recent symposium for women and female agents attended. I know that there's a luncheon coming up. I am grateful for all that everyone has done in the past to help women be where they are today. And I'm so excited to see what happens in the future with law enforcement.
Do you believe that that's our thanks to the people like Elaine or pioneers that started when, you just said that OCPD hired 5 females on their force when you first started. I don't know how many female agents we had at OBN in 75, but what you had to have gone through, the balance of family and your work was clearly, I know it was unbalanced because it was unbalanced when I started. So I cannot even imagine what you had to go through. The simple things as like restrooms or breaks, understanding like, man, I've been out here doing surveillance for 10, 15 hours and we're out in nowhere. People don't consider that stuff when it comes to females, but I would like to think, and I would like to, that the stuff that we're where we are now are because of people like Elaine Dobbs, Cindy Cunningham, and hopefully we will do so much better to appreciate and recognize everything that the females back in the 70s, 80s, and even early 90s went through.
There were no other women when I started you were saying at 70, actually no women in 75. I was an intelligence analyst, so 76 agents, and then it was another 2 or 3 years before we got Cindy. So, and even going through police school, they didn't know how to deal. Lonnie and I didn't have uniforms for them to diss us or give us negative points at the because it was the OCPD Academy. They did things on me like fuzzy hair. Like, I'll take that. Give me demerits for fuzzy hair. It's like, how do you treat women? It was different.
For many years after I got hired, they would buy us. Women would get the same uniform as a male. It was, and it didn't look right. I mean, sometimes I didn't even feel. I mean, you gotta. The way you look is how you're gonna feel. And a lot of times those clothing doesn't fit a woman the same way. But at that time they didn't care. That was not important to them. But little things like that I think go a long way, especially for our field. I haven't been out in the field for I'm gonna say 14 years now, maybe 15 years. And I still think about what made me feel the most uncomfortable when I was a field agent. And like Elaine, because I spoke Spanish and I was a female, I was utilized everywhere in the state. Sometimes I would forget that I had district offices. Sometimes I'd wonder, like, what am I doing here? Wait a minute. We have a district office. What am I doing here? But I will tell you this. I'm not angry or resent that. There's no bitterness because I like to be on the driver's side. As an undercover, you are the driver. And oh my gosh, the thrill that goes with that. You just can't really fully explain unless you've been in that position. It is insane. It is very euphoric. And so I didn't mind at all. But now that I've been in a supervisor and in administration for 10 years, I will go back and do everything I can. Hopefully I've done this to make things a lot easier for women, more comfortable. Not easier, but I want to have a fair playing ground. I want to make sure that females are treated as close to equally, if not equally, as our male counterparts. Whether it's uniforms, whether it's vest. I remember getting a vest and they did it wrong. And it only protected my chest part, like way up, like it could have been a sports bra.
Yeah.
And I said to I'm not going to say who my supervisor, and it wasn't Cindy, it was a male supervisor. And I said, hey, this is not right. Is it just me or what's going on? Like, oh, women are built differently than men. I'm thinking, well, we have the same organs and they're placed in the same place as a male. And I'm like, so I still had to deal with those kind of things. So what I feel as being an administrator or an administration is I need to make sure that we take care of our employees, take care of our field agents, because without them, we would not exist. And if I could do that, those little things I think go a long ways. And I hope they do. But I feel like that is something that I still had to endure when I was a field agent. And we're talking about 20 years after Elaine was an agent here. Like I said, we've made strides. Like OBN is a great place to work. We are. I'm not saying we're perfect and we still have a long ways as an agency, how we treat the genders as equally as possible. But this is a great place, especially again if you're wanting to make a difference because we're so proactive. But there are little things that we could do better. There are things that that I feel like if we just address, recognize, it can make everybody feel just as empowered.
Now that's funny. More important. The second chance vests. On that note, back when you saw one in 95 that didn't have enough coverage, that was better than the ones in 75, 76, which made a female look like a linebacker. So I did an undercover thing, Casey. We shut down a bar, actually, a big old boy named Tiny. And I did the undercover work, went outside. We all went back in and effected the arrest. Well, everyone else had on second chance vests and was all protected because it was one of those kind of situations. And I didn't do it because I couldn't have it on undercover looking like a linebacker. I mean, literally, it was just huge. So it's not, they have to accommodate women's shape. And you're exactly right. So thank you for watching out for that.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, you are exactly correct that the small things really do make people feel like they belong, and that belonging is really important when it comes to having the confidence to, for example, be at the table, to make those, like, to be vocal enough to be heard when you have ideas. And that those small things, people overlook them a lot, but they are really important to making that culture that is accepting to women and makes them feel like they have enough power to request those things and to be seen. So, I mean, it's such a good point, and it's just interesting to hear about what it's been like in the past because I am really fortunate for all the people who came before me and how much they've worked to help things. And I'm just really grateful that you guys have been in OBN history and you guys obviously care about helping women to feel like they belong in law enforcement, and it's really amazing.
Thank you. So I've had a lot of good directors. Not all have been great. We currently do have one that, in my opinion, resembles the same mindset as Lonnie Wright, which I feel like he's been reincarnated. And so how often does that happen? And that was the best time of my life and my career when Lonnie was my boss. And now, here at my tail end of my career, I'm having the same experience and opportunity. So for future directors out there, remember the little things are just as important. And it goes a long way, especially, with females, just little things go a long way. So future directors, keep that in mind.
Yeah.
It's a great point. I don't know. I think that's probably most of the things that I would want to talk about today, unless you all have more topics that you guys want to cover.
No, I mean, Elaine, again, just want to take this opportunity to say thank you. Thank you for what you did back then. I know that at the time it probably didn't mean anything to you. You didn't realize what an impact, what a footprint you would have in this agency, but it's been huge. And obviously it's lasted this long, and I think it will continue to last a long, long time. OBN wouldn't be where it's at had it not been for people like you, for all the people in the 70s and just all the pioneers. And I hope that you know that all your efforts that you put out there when you were in diversion as a chief, as a director, is still the same, I believe, kind of how we practice nowadays, which again, it goes to why we are as successful as we are. And I believe, and maybe because I've basically was raised at OBN, I come in contact. I'm one of my units in my division is training, and so I get an opportunity to meet a lot of people from all over the country. And the way they talk about OBN It's flattering and I love it. But again, it goes back to that mindset that you, along with the other ones in 1975, had for this agency, and know that that vision hasn't been lost. That vision is still ingrained in us every day. So thank you for all that, and know that it wasn't for nothing. All your efforts, they continue to breathe and live.
Thank you for being there and just doing what you do, because I know you've had an even bigger impact there, and let's just keep supporting the women. I love hearing you say that because I believe in that so firmly. So I'm on your team for that.
Well, we've got Hannah here who will continue that torch. We're going to pass that torch to her.
There you go. Thanks, Hannah. You did a brilliant job.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I do also want to say just thank you so much for all that you've done at OBN, both of you. And I know that it wasn't easy to start in the 70s and to forge this place, but I do appreciate it as well. And I asked HR for the statistic for it, and we actually have 40% women employed at OBN, which is not 50, but it is a higher than the national average. So we can, I'm sure that that is in part because of all the hard work that women have done, including yourself, of course, at OBN, and all the minds that you changed. Like you said before, that like you had a supervisor who even came back to you after he had retired to say that, yeah, I mean, it's an amazing story, and you really changed minds, and that is so important to us at OBN. Thank you both so much for being here today and for providing us with your insights and your experiences and your expertise. But thank you guys so much.
Thank you.